I stared at the email draft on his laptop, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of his desk. Dear Sydney, I've arranged everything. Next week we'll be free to start our life together. The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes, but the message was crystal clear. After 12 years of marriage, my husband was planning his exit strategy with his 26-year-old girlfriend. My name is Lana, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I was living the American dream. Now I'm standing in our home office, realizing that dream was built on quicksand. Honey, I'm home, Cody's voice echoed through our house, the house I'd helped pay for while he chased his entrepreneurial dreams. I quickly closed the laptop and wiped my eyes, my mind racing to process what I'd discovered. In here, I called out, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Just organizing some papers. Cody appeared in the doorway, his confident smile unchanged from the day I first fell in love with him. You're always working so hard, he said, crossing the room to kiss my cheek. I've got great news. The investors loved my pitch. They're ready to commit $10 million to the new venture. I forced a smile, remembering how I'd helped him practice that pitch for weeks. That's wonderful, baby. We should celebrate. Actually, I have a business dinner tonight. Rain check. Of course he did. I nodded, maintaining my composure as I watched him grab his good suit from our bedroom. The same suit I'd bought him last Christmas, telling him it brought out his eyes. Don't wait up, he called out, already halfway down the stairs. As soon as I heard his car pull away, I reopened his laptop. Thank God he'd never bothered to change his password from our anniversary date. I began taking photos of everything with my phone. Emails, bank statements, hidden accounts. My phone buzzed. It was my sister Kennedy. Hey sis, you'll never believe who I just saw at Cafe Milano. Cody was there with some colleagues, looking very cozy with their new marketing director. My throat tightened. Sydney Price? Yeah, how did you know? I took a deep breath. Kennedy, I need your help. Can you come over? 30 minutes later, we sat at my kitchen island, screenshots spread out between us like a roadmap of betrayal. Oh my God, Lana, Kennedy whispered, scrolling through the evidence. I can't believe this. I'm the one who always told you to support his dreams, to invest in his future. I feel horrible. Don't, I said, surprising myself with my calm. You couldn't have known. What are you going to do? I pulled out another folder, one I'd kept hidden in my own office for years. Remember when we got married, and I insisted on that elaborate prenup? Kennedy's eyes widened. The one Cody barely read because he was so sure you'd never need it. Exactly. I opened the document, pointing to specific clauses. See this? Any business venture started during our marriage, using joint funds or supported by spousal labor, is considered joint property. And this part about intellectual property, all those patents he filed while I supported us, they're half mine. Holy shit, Lana. You planned for this? Not exactly. I ran my finger along the rim of my wine glass. I just never trusted anyone completely after watching Dad leave Mom with nothing. I learned from her mistakes. Kennedy leaned forward. Does Cody know about these clauses? He's about to find out. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd saved years ago. Sebastian, it's Lana Lynch. Remember that conversation we had when you drafted my prenup? I need your help. As I spoke with my lawyer, I could see Kennedy's expression shift from shock to admiration. When I hung up, she grabbed my hand. What happened to my sweet sacrificing sister? I squeezed her hand back. She woke up. You know what the worst part is? In all those emails to Sydney, he keeps talking about his success, his sacrifices, his vision. 12 years I spent supporting him, working extra hours at my job so he could quit his, editing his proposals, networking for him. And now he's trying to leave me with nothing but my salary and some equity in our house. He's going to regret this, Kennedy said firmly. I looked at the prenup again, thinking of all the interviews Cody had given, bragging about building his empire alone. Every recorded word would now work against him. Yes, I said quietly, he is. But first, I need to let him think he's winning. Tomorrow, I'm going to start playing the role of the unsuspecting wife one last time. Let him think he's got it all figured out. The game was just beginning, and for once, I held all the cards. The memory of my first meeting with Sebastian felt especially vivid as I sat in his office again, exactly 10 years after we'd drafted the prenup. The same leather chairs, the same view of downtown, even the same knowing smile on his face. "I have to admit, Lana," he said, adjusting his reading glasses, "when we wrote these clauses, I hoped you'd never need them. That makes two of us." I handed him the folder containing my evidence. But here we are. Sebastian flipped through the documents, his expression growing more satisfied with each page. These interviews he gave to Business Weekly, did he really claim he built everything from scratch? Oh, it gets better. I pulled up a video on my phone. Here's his TED Talk from last month. Skip to 14:30. We watched as Cody strutted across the stage, his charisma on full display. Success comes to those who take risks. I mortgaged everything I had, worked 18-hour days, and never took the easy way out. Sebastian paused the video, chuckling. He does realize we have documented proof that you were the primary breadwinner for the first 6 years of his ventures, right? Apparently he's forgotten that detail. I leaned forward. Along with the fact that I edited every business plan, attended every investor meeting, and networked at every conference. This is going to be easier than I thought. Sebastian pulled out a legal pad. Now, about the timing. A knock at the door interrupted us. Sebastian's assistant poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Lynch is here to see you." My stomach dropped. "Noelle? Cody's mother?" Before Sebastian could respond, Noelle swept into the office, designer handbag swinging. "Lana, darling, I thought I recognized your car outside." I kept my face neutral, even as my mind raced. Had Cody sent her? "What a surprise, Noelle. I'm in the middle of a meeting." "Oh, don't mind me." She settled into the chair beside me like she owned it. "I'm just here to talk about this silly misunderstanding between you and Cody." Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Lynch, this is a private consultation." "Please," Noelle waved her hand dismissively. "We're family. Lana, sweetie, Cody told me everything. These things happen in marriages, but destroying his business, that's not you." I felt a flash of anger. "What exactly did Cody tell you?" "That you're upset about his long hours at work, about some young girl you think he's interested in. But we both know Cody would never—" "Show her the emails," I told Sebastian. He slid the printouts across his desk. I watched Noelle's perfectly maintained facade crack as she read them. These could be fake," she stammered. "They're not." I pulled out my phone. "But here's a video from last week. Sydney posted it on her Instagram story. She probably thought it was private." The clip showed Cody and Sydney at a rooftop bar, his hand on her waist as they watched the sunset. The timestamp matched the night of his business dinner. Noelle's face hardened. "What do you want, Lana? Money? A bigger settlement?" "I want what I earned." I stood up, gathering my things. "Sebastian, please show Noelle the clauses about family interference in divorce proceedings. The ones that specify how attempts to mediate without legal representation could affect the distribution of assets." Sebastian smiled. "Of course. Mrs. Lynch, if you'll look at page 12, I walked out, my heels clicking against the marble floor, but stopped just around the corner when I heard voices from the stairwell. "No, Cody, it's worse than we thought." Noelle's voice was urgent. "She's got everything documented. The prenup. It's not just about money. She can claim partial ownership of your patents." A pause. "That's impossible. I never agreed to that." "Well, you signed it, darling. What do we do?" "Keep her calm. I'll talk to Kennedy, see if she can reason with her sister. In the meantime, I'm moving the new company assets offshore. Lana won't be able to touch those." I pressed record on my phone, my hand steady. Another piece of evidence for Sebastian. Back in my car, I called Kennedy. "Hey, heads up. Cody's going to reach out to you about talking me down. Let me guess. Play the sympathetic sister. Convince you to be reasonable?" "Exactly. Perfect." Kennedy's voice was steel. "I'll record everything." By the way, you should check your email. I found something interesting in Mom's old correspondence with Dad's lawyer. I pulled up my email at a red light. There it was, proof that Cody had consulted the same divorce attorney 6 months ago, right when his first company went public. He'd been planning this for months, waiting until he thought he was untouchable. But he'd forgotten the most important lesson of all. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. And I was about to show him just how far down rock bottom really was. I was making coffee when Kennedy burst through my front door, her face flushed with anger. You won't believe what just happened. Cody reached out. I poured her a cup, already knowing the answer. Oh, he did more than that. She pulled out her phone and hit play. Cody's voice filled my kitchen. Kennedy, you know your sister. She's being irrational, letting emotions cloud her judgment. If she pursues this, it'll destroy everything I've built. Everything you've built? Kennedy's recorded voice dripped with skepticism. Look, I'll make it worth your while. Help me convince her to accept a reasonable settlement, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. That boutique you've always wanted to open, consider it funded. I gripped my coffee mug tighter. He tried to bribe you? Wait for it. Kennedy fast-forwarded the recording. Your sister's always been fragile, Cody continued. Remember her depression after your dad left? We could suggest she's not thinking clearly. A judge might consider that. The mug slipped from my hands, shattering on the floor. Coffee splashed across my bare feet, but I barely felt it. He's going to use Dad against me. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Try to make me look unstable. Kennedy grabbed paper towels, kneeling to clean up the mess. That's not even the worst part. Guess who he's been meeting with? Who? Dad. The room seemed to tilt. Our father, who'd abandoned us 15 years ago for his secretary, was now advising my husband on how to leave his wife with nothing. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. When? I managed to ask. Last week, at that new steakhouse downtown. Kennedy stood up, tossing the soaked paper towels in the trash. Dad's apparently some sort of divorce mentor now, giving Cody tips on how to hide assets, manipulate the narrative. A knock at the door interrupted us. Through the glass panels, I could see Harlan, our family friend and voice of reason for the past decade. I heard about Cody, he said as soon as I opened the door. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd try to talk me out of what I'm about to do. Harlan followed us into the kitchen, his expression concerned. And what exactly are you about to do? Justice, Kennedy answered for me. Or karma, whatever you want to call it. Lana, Harlan's voice was gentle. Revenge won't heal what's broken. This isn't about revenge. I pulled out the latest stack of documents Kennedy had brought. This is about consequences. Look at these transfer records. While I was supporting us, Cody was funneling money into secret accounts. My money, Harlan. Money that should have gone to our future family. Harlan scanned the papers, his frown deepening. These dates, they align with when you were trying to get pregnant. Exactly. The pain of those years hit fresh. Every time I thought we were saving for IVF, he was actually building his escape fund. Play him the recording, Kennedy urged. After listening, Harlan sat heavily in a kitchen chair. Jesus, I've known Cody for 10 years. I never thought. That's the thing about masks, I said. They only work until someone sees behind them. My phone buzzed, a text from Sebastian. The judge assigned to our case, it's Judge Martinez. Kennedy gasped. The same judge who approved your prenup? Which means she remembers exactly what Cody agreed to, and why. I felt a glimmer of hope. She watched him laugh off those clauses, saying he'd never need to worry about them because we'd be together forever. Lana, Harlan leaned forward, before you go nuclear, consider offering him one chance to come clean, for your own peace of mind. I already did. I pulled up my email. Last night, I asked him to meet for dinner, to talk about our future. I showed them his response. Sorry, swamped with work. Let's discuss everything with our lawyers present. While he sent that, Kennedy added, pulling up Instagram, he was here. The location tag showed Cody and Sydney at a romantic restaurant across town, Her diamond bracelet, probably bought with our money, glinting in the candlelight. Harlan stood up, his decision made. What do you need from me? Your tech company handles Cody's cloud storage, right? He nodded slowly. You want access to his business files? Just the ones that prove he used joint assets as startup capital. Nothing privileged. Harlan pulled out his phone. I'll have my team pull everything, legally and transparently. No back channels. Thank you. I hugged him, feeling tears threaten. I know this puts you in an awkward position. No, he said firmly. Cody put everyone in an awkward position when he chose to betray not just his wife, but his entire support system. As Harlan left, Kennedy squeezed my hand. Ready for war? I looked at the shattered mug on my floor, a wedding gift from Cody's mother. I've been ready since the day I wrote that prenup. I just didn't know it yet. Mrs. Lynch? The barista called out my order, and I turned to find myself face to face with Sydney. Of all the coffee shops in the city, she had to walk into this one. Oh! She stepped back, nearly dropping her own drink. I'm so sorry, Sydney. I picked up my latte, keeping my voice neutral. No need to apologize. We were bound to run into each other eventually. She glanced around nervously, probably checking for witnesses. I know this is awkward, but could we maybe talk? There are some things you should understand about Cody and me. Every instinct screamed to walk away, but Sebastian's voice echoed in my head. Information is ammunition. I gestured to a corner table. Sure, why not? Sydney sat down, fidgeting with her cup. Cody told me about your marriage problems, how you grew apart, focused too much on work. I had to bite back a laugh. Is that what he said? He said you changed after the fertility treatments didn't work, became distant. She leaned forward, eyes full of rehearsed sympathy. I want you to know, nothing happened between us until after he realized your marriage was over. When was that exactly? About 6 months ago. She smiled, probably thinking she was helping his case. Right after his first company went public, I pulled out my phone, opened my notes app, and started typing. 6 months ago. Interesting. And when did he first mention the possibility of marriage to you? Sydney brightened. Just last week. He said once everything's settled, we could start planning. He even showed me this amazing ring. Let me guess. Platinum band, 3-carat oval diamond with trapezoid side stones. Her mouth fell open. How did you... Because I helped him design that ring 15 years ago. It was my engagement ring before I sold it to help fund his first startup. I took a sip of my latte. He's nothing if not consistent. You're lying. But uncertainty crept into her voice. Am I? Ask him about the inscription. For my North Star, because that's what he called me when we met in college. I wonder what he calls you. His sunshine, she whispered, face paling. Because I brightened his darkest days. Ah, new metaphor, same script. I stood up, gathering my things. One more thing, those fertility treatments he blamed for our problems. Check his private email from March 2019. The subject line is test results. You might want to ask him about that before you start picking out China patterns. I was halfway to the door when she called out, Wait, what's in the email? That's not my story to tell, but unlike my husband, I believe in informed consent. Back in my car, I called Sebastian. You were right, she had no idea about the vasectomy. Perfect. Her testimony about his deception will strengthen our case. Sebastian paused. Have you looked at the files Harlan sent over? Not yet. I'm heading to the office now. Good. There's something you need to see. 20 minutes later, I sat in my office, staring at my computer screen in disbelief. Harlan's team had uncovered a trail of loans and leveraged assets that made my blood run cold. He borrowed how much? I asked Harlan through my speakerphone. 50 million, using your joint properties as collateral, including your mother's house that you inherited. My hand started shaking. Does he even have the authority to do that? That's the thing, Harlan said grimly. He forged your signatures on several documents. We found the originals in his cloud backup. I heard Sebastian whistle on the other line. Forgery and fraud. Now we're talking criminal charges, not just civil. My office door opened and Kennedy slipped in, holding up her phone. Sydney just posted this. It was a screenshot of a bank statement showing a recent transfer of $250,000 into her account, with the caption, "When he says you're worth investing in." "That's from our joint account," I said, recognizing the account number, the one he promised not to touch during proceedings. "Forward that to me," Sebastian said. "I'm calling an emergency hearing. He's violating the temporary orders." "There's more," Harlan added. "That $50 million, it's due in 30 days. He was counting on the divorce being settled by then, with you taking on half the debt." I leaned back in my chair, pieces clicking into place. "So that's why he's rushing everything. He's not just leaving me. He's trying to saddle me with his bad bets." "Not anymore," Sebastian's voice hardened. "I'm filing for an immediate freeze on all accounts. Harlan, can you send those forgery documents to my office?" "Already done." As I hung up, Kennedy hugged me. "You okay?" "No." I looked at the photo of Cody and me on my desk, taken on our 10th anniversary. "But I will be, after I make sure he never does this to anyone else." I turned the photo face down, just as my phone lit up with a text from Sydney. "We need to talk. About everything." Game on, Cody. Game on. The emergency hearing was set for tomorrow morning, but tonight I had a different meeting to attend. I found Sydney already waiting at the back booth of the quiet bar I'd suggested, an untouched martini in front of her. "I read the email," she said as I sat down, "about the vasectomy." "And?" "He told me he wanted children. We'd been planning." She took a shaky breath. 3 months ago, he started talking about baby names. The waitress appeared, and I ordered a whiskey neat. "Let me guess. He liked Emma for a girl, Nathan for a boy." Sydney's face crumpled. "How did you know?" "Those were his pics 12 years ago, too." I pulled out my phone, showing her a photo of a nursery design board. "This was our spare room, before he convinced me to turn it into his home office." "I feel so stupid." She wiped her eyes with a cocktail napkin. "The money he transferred to my account was from our joint savings, money I earned. I transferred it back as soon as I saw the news about the emergency hearing." She pulled out her phone, showing me the confirmation. "I saved the original transfer receipt too. Will that help your case?" I forwarded the screenshots to Sebastian. "Yes, it will. Thank you. There's something else." She dug through her purse, producing a USB drive. "Last week, Cody asked me to store some files on my personal cloud account. Said it was for safekeeping during a system upgrade. I looked at them yesterday after our coffee shop talk. Well, you should see for yourself." Back at my house, Kennedy and Harlan huddled around my laptop as I plugged in the drive. "Holy shit," Kennedy breathed, scrolling through the documents. "These are transfer records to offshore accounts." Harlan pointed at the screen. "Look at these dates. He started moving money the day after his first company went public, right when he met Sydney." "It gets worse," Sydney said quietly. "There are emails about something called Project Phoenix. It's a plan to bankrupt his current companies, then rebuy the assets at pennies on the dollar through shell corporations." I felt the blood drain from my face. All those employees, their jobs, their pensions. "I'll call Sebastian," Harlan said, already dialing. "This is securities fraud. We need to get the SEC involved." My phone buzzed, Cody's name flashing on the screen. I put it on speaker. "Lana, baby, we need to talk." His voice was honey smooth, the way it always got when he wanted something. "I just heard from my lawyer about tomorrow's hearing. This is getting out of hand." "Is it?" I kept my voice steady. "How's Project Phoenix going?" A pause. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Did you really think you could hide everything forever?" "Whatever you think you know." He stopped abruptly. I could hear him moving, probably checking who might be listening. "Where are you?" "Safe, which is more than I can say for your freedom once the SEC sees these files." "What files?" "Lana, you're not thinking clearly. Remember what happened after your dad left? How emotional you got? Maybe you should talk to someone. You mean like how you've been talking to my father about hiding assets? I nodded to Kennedy, who played her recording of his bribery attempt. That was taken out of context. Save it for court. I hung up, hands trembling despite my brave words. Sydney touched my arm. I'm so sorry. I never knew. It's not your fault. I meant it. He's been playing this game for years. I was just too loyal to see it. My phone lit up with texts. Noelle, please don't destroy my son's life. We can work this out. Dad, your mother and I taught you better than this vindictive behavior. Cody, think carefully about your next move. You're not the only one with evidence. He's desperate, Harlan observed. That makes him dangerous. Let him try something, Kennedy said fiercely. We have everything documented. Speaking of documentation, Sydney pulled out one more thing, a small notebook. I kept a diary of everything since we met, including the times he talked about hiding money from his unstable wife. Will that help? Sebastian's voice came through the speakerphone. That's exactly what we need. Sydney, are you willing to testify? She straightened her shoulders. Yes, I want to make this right. I looked around the room, at Kennedy's protective stance, Harlan's steady presence, even Sydney's unexpected alliance. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly strong. Tomorrow morning, Sebastian said, we end this. No, I corrected him, thinking of all the other women Cody might have targeted next. Tomorrow morning, we start making things right. The pieces were in place. The truth was coming to light, and Cody's carefully constructed house of cards was about to come crashing down. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I was organizing files in my home office when the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw Cody standing on my porch, swaying slightly. Go away, I said through the intercom. Just hear me out. His words slurred. 5 minutes. Everything goes through our lawyers now. Remember our first apartment? He pressed his forehead against the door. That tiny studio where we could barely afford ramen. You believed in me then. What changed? You did. But I found myself opening the door anyway, keeping the security chain latched. You're drunk. Had to be to come here. He looked terrible, designer shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. I saw the SEC filing. You're really going to do this? You did this. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. He laughed bitterly. The truth? The truth is, you were suffocating me. Always so perfect, so supportive. Do you know how that feels? Living in your shadow. My shadow? I slammed the door shut, then reopened it without the chain. Let's talk about shadows, Cody. Let's talk about how I worked 60-hour weeks so you could quit your job. How I edited every proposal, coached you through every pitch. I never asked you to do that. No, you just expected it. Like you expected me to keep quiet about the vasectomy. To keep playing the supportive wife while you built your escape fund. He stepped back, surprise flickering across his face. How did you... Find out? Sydney showed me everything. I pulled out my phone, playing the video she'd recorded of him describing Project Phoenix, including your plans to destroy your own companies. That bitch, he snarled, mask finally slipping. She had no right. She had every right, just like I had every right to protect myself with that prenup you never bothered to read carefully. His face darkened. You think you're so clever? I still have the recordings. What recordings? From your therapy sessions after the failed IVF, your depression, your anxiety. He smiled meanly. How do you think a judge will view your mental state? I felt ice in my veins, but kept my voice steady. Those sessions were private, protected by law. Amazing what people will share when you pay them enough. He stepped closer. Drop the SEC filing, accept my settlement offer, or everyone will know just how unstable you really are. Back away from her. Harlan's voice cut through the night. He emerged from the shadows of my garden, phone held up. Got all that on video, buddy? Cody spun around. You're recording me. We're recording everything. Kennedy appeared from behind her car across the street. Have been for weeks. including that little confession about bribing medical professionals. You set me up. Cody turned back to me, realization dawning. No. I stood straighter. You set yourself up. I just made sure there were witnesses. This isn't over. He stumbled back toward his car. You're not driving, Harlan said firmly, already dialing. I'm calling you a car, and if you try to leave, I'm calling the police. We watched in silence as Cody was loaded into a rideshare, his threats fading into the night. You okay? Kennedy hugged me once he was gone. No. I let out a shaky breath. But I will be. Thank you both for being here. Sebastian's going to love this footage, Harlan said, sending the video to our lawyer. Threatening to expose confidential medical records? That's another criminal charge. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I opened it to find Cody's face plastered across the business section. Tech CEO faces fraud allegations, stock plummets. It's starting, Kennedy said softly. More alerts followed. Major investors pull out amid scandal. Board calls emergency meeting. SEC launches full investigation. Look at this. Harlan showed us his phone. Sydney had posted a public statement on LinkedIn, detailing everything she knew about Project Phoenix. The comments were exploding. She really came through, I said. We all did. Kennedy squeezed my hand. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be intense. But as they left, I didn't go to bed. Instead, I sat in my office, surrounded by 12 years of memories. Photos of business launches, award ceremonies, charity galas, all moments where I'd stood in the background, supporting his spotlight. My phone lit up with a text from Sebastian. Everything's ready, you've got this. Another from Sydney. I'll be there tomorrow, he can't silence us all. And finally, one from Harlan. Remember, this isn't about revenge, it's about justice. I looked at my wedding photo, at the young woman who thought love meant sacrificing everything. Tomorrow, I'd show the world, and myself, exactly how wrong that was. The sun was rising when I finally went to bed, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The truth was on my side, and for once, that was enough. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Martinez entered. Cody sat across the aisle with his legal team, looking immaculate in a custom suit, probably bought with more of our money. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Before we begin, Judge Martinez said, adjusting her glasses, I want to address the media attention this case has received. This is not a circus. This is a court of law. Sebastian stood. Your Honor, given recent developments, we'd like to present new evidence regarding Mr. Lynch's financial dealings. Objection. Cody's lawyer jumped up. Any evidence related to the ongoing SEC investigation should be inadmissible. Overruled. Judge Martinez's gaze was sharp. Proceed, Counselor. Sebastian projected the first document, Cody's email about Project Phoenix. As you can see, Your Honor, Mr. Lynch planned to deliberately bankrupt his companies while protecting his personal assets through offshore accounts. These are private business matters, Cody's lawyer protested. They became matrimonial matters, Sebastian countered, when Mr. Lynch used jointly owned properties as collateral for his schemes. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Lynch, did you obtain your wife's permission before leveraging these properties? Cody cleared his throat. I had implied consent based on our marriage. That's a no, Judge Martinez cut him off. Continue, Counselor. Sebastian played the video from last night. The courtroom buzzed as Cody threatened to expose my medical records. I watched his mother's face fall, finally seeing her son for who he really was. Furthermore, Sebastian added, we have testimony from Sydney Price about Mr. Lynch's deliberate deception. Sydney walked in, head high despite the whispers. She took the stand and detailed everything. The hidden accounts, the manipulation, the planned corporate bankruptcy. And when did Mr. Lynch inform you of his vasectomy? Sebastian asked. He didn't. Sydney's voice was clear. He spent months discussing our future children, knowing it was impossible. Objection, Cody's lawyer again. My client's medical decisions are private. Like my therapy sessions? I couldn't help interjecting. Judge Martinez banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Lynch, would you like to address these allegations? Cody stood, straightening his tie. Your Honor, my wife is clearly emotional about our separation. She's fabricating— I have the medical records, Sebastian interrupted, presenting another document. The vasectomy was performed 3 months before Mr. Lynch began fertility treatments with my client, treatments he knew would fail. The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez banged her gavel again. Enough. Mr. Lynch, do you deny these records? Cody's lawyer whispered something to him. He sat down without answering. Your Honor, Sebastian continued, given Mr. Lynch's documented fraud, threats, and violation of court orders, we're asking for full financial discovery and an immediate freeze on all accounts. You can't do this, Cody suddenly shouted, mask finally cracking. I built everything. She just rode my coattails. I have your TED Talk, Sebastian said calmly, pulling up the video, where you claim, and I quote, I mortgaged everything I had. Shall we discuss whose salary actually paid those mortgages? The judge held up her hand. I've seen enough. Given the evidence of financial misconduct and attempted witness intimidation, I'm granting the freeze on all accounts. Furthermore, I'm referring evidence of criminal conduct to the district attorney's office. Cody slumped in his chair as Sebastian presented our final motion, the enforcement of the prenup's intellectual property clauses. As you'll recall, Your Honor, Sebastian said, you oversaw the prenup's creation. The clauses clearly state that patents developed during the marriage are joint property. I remember, Judge Martinez looked at Cody. I also remember Mr. Lynch laughing about those clauses, saying they were unnecessary because, and I quote, what's mine is hers forever. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Given the overwhelming evidence of fraud, the judge continued, I'm upholding all prenuptial clauses. Mr. Lynch, you'll transfer 50% ownership of all patents and intellectual property developed during the marriage to your wife. Additionally, you'll pay her legal fees and compensatory damages for the attempted character assassination. Cody's mother burst into tears. His lawyer started scribbling appeal notes, but Cody just sat there, staring at his empire crumbling. One more thing, Judge Martinez added. Mrs. Lynch, the court recognizes your significant contributions to building these companies. Your husband's attempts to erase those contributions stopped today. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Sebastian guided me through them to where Kennedy, Harlan, and Sydney waited. It's done, I said, finally letting tears fall. Not quite, Harlan replied, showing me his phone. Breaking news, Cody's board of directors had called an emergency vote. He was being removed as CEO. What now? Sydney asked quietly. I looked at the courthouse steps where Cody was facing a mob of reporters, his carefully crafted image shattered. Now, I said, we rebuild. But this time, on honest foundations. Kennedy hugged me. Ready to go home? I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in years. The truth hadn't just set me free. It had given me back my power. The morning sun streamed through my office windows as I signed the final paperwork. Not divorce papers, those were long settled, but documents establishing a foundation to help victims of financial abuse. That's the last one, Sebastian said, gathering the forms. The Foundation for Economic Justice is officially launched. I still think we should have named it the Karma Fund, Kennedy joked from her spot on my office couch. My phone buzzed with a text from Sydney. Turn on CNBC now. I grabbed the remote, and Cody's face filled the screen. He was leaving a different courthouse, this one federal. The headline below read, Tech CEO pleads guilty to securities fraud. He took the plea deal, Harlan said, walking in with coffee for everyone. 5 years and full restitution. How are the companies doing? I asked him, though I already knew. I'd been part of the recovery team. Better than ever. The new management team is implementing all your suggestions. Transparent operations, ethical practices, proper profit sharing with employees. He smiled. Amazing what happens when you run things honestly. Speaking of honest operations, Kennedy pulled up an article on her tablet. Have you seen the latest about Dad? I skimmed the headline. Disgraced divorce attorney faces ethics investigation. After his role in Cody's schemes came to light, other former clients had come forward with similar stories. Your mother called, Kennedy added softly. She's proud of you, for standing up not just for yourself, but for others. A knock at my door interrupted us. Noelle stood there, looking smaller than I remembered. May I come in? I nodded, and she stepped into my office, clutching her designer bag like a shield. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she said, about how I raised Cody, how I taught him that success matters more than integrity. She pulled out an envelope. I'd like to make a donation to your foundation. It's not much, but... It's not about the money, I told her. It's about breaking the cycle. I know. She wiped her eyes. I also wanted to give you this. She handed me a small box. Inside was my original engagement ring, the one I'd sold to fund Cody's first company. I found it at an estate sale. Thought maybe you could sell it again, this time for the foundation. Actually, I said, I have a better idea. That evening, I stood in front of a room full of domestic violence survivors at a local shelter, the ring glinting under fluorescent lights. This ring represents something different now, I told them. We're going to auction it, and every penny will go toward helping people escape financial abuse. Because sometimes the worst prison isn't built with bars, it's built with bank accounts and lies. Sydney, who'd become one of our strongest advocates, stepped forward. The foundation isn't just about money. It's about education. Teaching people to recognize the signs, protect themselves, and reclaim their power. And speaking of power, Harlan added, wait until they hear about our new corporate partnership program. My phone lit up with another news alert. Cody's former companies, under new leadership, had pledged to match all foundation donations for the next year. Looks like karma comes in many forms, Kennedy whispered. Later that night, as we cleaned up after the shelter presentation, Sebastian handed me one last document. What's this? The official name change paperwork. You're officially back to your maiden name. I signed without hesitation, feeling the last weight lift from my shoulders. You know, Harlan said, helping me pack up, when this all started, I worried revenge would consume you. It wasn't about revenge in the end. I looked around at my support system, my sister, my friends, even unexpected allies like Sydney and Noelle. It was about justice, about showing others they're not alone, and about building something better from the ashes, Kennedy added. My phone buzzed one last time, an email from one of our first foundation clients. Thank you for showing me I'm not crazy. That financial abuse is real. Today I left him, and I'm never looking back. I showed the email to everyone, and Sydney squeezed my hand. That's why we do this. No, I corrected her. That's why we do this, all of us. As we walked out together, I caught my reflection in the window. I didn't see a victim, or even a survivor. I saw a warrior who'd turned her pain into purpose. Ready for tomorrow? Harlan asked. That congressional testimony on financial abuse won't give itself. I smiled, feeling stronger than ever. Ready for anything, because this isn't an ending, it's a beginning. For all of us. The night air was cool on my face as we stepped outside, and for the first time in forever, I felt completely, utterly free. Not because I'd won, but because I'd found my true purpose. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's helping others rise above.
Mary, are you sure about this? My best friend, Lucy, asked as we sat in my small but cozy living room. The walls were lined with bookshelves, a testament to my love for fantasy and writing. I sighed, pushing a lock of hair behind my ear. About marrying Alex? Yeah, I am. But his family? That's a whole different story. Lucy raised an eyebrow, her skepticism clear. Especially his mom, huh? I nodded. Mrs. Thompson, Alex's mother, she's something else. Always prying, always judging. And don't get me started on the wedding plans. The doorbell rang, and in came Mrs. Thompson, as if on cue, with her usual air of self-importance. "Mary, dear, we need to talk about the wedding dress," she said, barely a hello. I braced myself. "What about it, Mrs. Thompson?" She waved a dismissive hand. "The one you chose, it's just not suitable. I found the perfect one yesterday. It's only a bit over your budget." "A bit?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Well, it's double your budget. But it's worth it," she declared, her tone leaving no room for argument. I exchanged a helpless look with Lucy. "Mrs. Thompson, I can't afford that." "Nonsense," she snapped. "It's your special day. You can cut corners elsewhere. This dress is a must." Feeling cornered, I reluctantly agreed. It was easier than arguing. The next day, we went to the bridal shop. The dress was indeed beautiful, but the price tag made my stomach churn. As I tried it on, Mrs. Thompson gushed over how stunning I looked. "It's settled then," she said, clapping her hands together. "We'll take it." I hesitated. "But the price, Mrs. Thompson." "Don't you worry," she interrupted, "I'll help you out. Consider it my gift to you." Relief washed over me. Maybe I had misjudged her. Fast forward to the wedding day, the dress was a hit. Everyone complimented me, and I felt like a princess. But after the wedding, when I approached Mrs. Thompson about the dress payment, she conveniently forgot her promise. "Mary, dear, I never said I'd pay for the whole thing. I said I'd help. You know, with the choosing." I was flabbergasted. "But you said..." She waved me off. "You must have misunderstood. Anyway, it's done now. No use crying over spilt milk." I stood there, feeling cheated and foolish. Lucy was right. I should have been more careful. It was a Thursday, just like any other, except it wasn't. I was in my home office, the smallest room in the house, cluttered with my writing stuff. The only place where I could find some peace, or so I thought. The sound of the doorbell shattered the quiet. I knew who it was without even looking. Mrs. Thompson had this habit of showing up unannounced, as if our house was a public park. "Mary, dear, I'm here," she bellowed from the living room, not bothering to wait for me to answer the door. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the ordeal ahead. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson," I greeted, trying to sound pleasant. "Oh, there you are, hiding in your little room," she said, peering around with a look of disdain. "You really should get out more, dear." I forced a smile. "I'm actually quite busy with my writing." "Writing, schmitting." She waved her hand dismissively. "You need to live a little. Now, where's the remote? I want to catch my show." As she plopped onto the sofa, turning on the TV, I couldn't help but feel a surge of irritation. My home was turning into her daytime retreat. "Mrs. Thompson, I was hoping to get some work done today," I said, trying to sound firm yet polite. She looked at me, her eyebrows raised. "Oh, don't be silly. Your little stories can wait. I need to relax. You know, I save so much on my electricity bill coming here." I was at a loss for words. The audacity was astounding. And to make matters worse, she headed straight for the kitchen next. "What's for lunch, Mary? I'm starving," she called out, rummaging through the fridge. I followed her, my frustration growing. "Mrs. Thompson, I haven't prepared lunch yet. I was planning to eat later." She shrugged, pulling out ingredients. "No problem, I'll make do with whatever you have. You should really stock up better, though." There I was, watching her take over my kitchen, using my groceries. The sense of intrusion was overwhelming. Alex walked in just then, home for lunch. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Just visiting, darling. Mary and I are having a lovely time," she lied smoothly. I glanced at Alex, hoping he'd say something, but he just shrugged and sat down, turning his attention to the TV. It was clear where he stood, or rather, where he chose to sit, firmly on the fence. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow into my small home office. The walls, lined with shelves of fantasy novels and manuscripts, seemed to close in on me as I sat there, typing away. My world of mythical creatures and grand adventures was a sharp contrast to the reality I was living. The door to my sanctuary burst open with a force that made me jump. Mrs. Thompson stormed in, her face twisted in a mix of disgust and irritation. "Mary, what in the world are you still doing cooped up in here? It's like you're married to that damn computer. There's a real world out there, you know," she exclaimed, her voice laced with contempt. I sighed, pausing my typing. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm working. This is my job, my career." She let out a derisive snort. "Job? You call sitting on your behind all day, making up fairy tales, a job? That's the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard." I tried to keep my voice steady. Writing is a legitimate profession. I'm a published author. It's not just a hobby. She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Published, schmublished. All this nonsense about dragons and magic wands. It's child's play. Get a real job, contribute something useful to society." Her words were like a barrage of arrows, each one striking its mark. Before I could muster a response, my husband Alex walked in, his expression mirroring his mother's disapproval. "What's the racket about?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Your wife here thinks she's doing the world a favor with her silly stories," Mrs. Thompson said, waving a dismissive hand at my computer. Alex's gaze fell on me, cold and judgmental. "Mary, Mom's right. This isn't a real job. When are you going to stop living in this fantasy world and do something worthwhile?" I felt a knot form in my stomach. "Alex, I am doing something worthwhile. I'm a writer. My books are sold internationally." He let out a cynical laugh. "International? Please, don't make me laugh. How much do you even make from these so-called books?" "It's a joke." I clenched my fists, trying to control the rising tide of anger and frustration. "My writing does contribute. It's not just about the money. It's my passion, my life's work." Alex shook his head, an expression of mock pity on his face. "Passion won't pay the bills, Mary. It's time you grew up and got a proper job, one that pays regularly." The conversation was going in circles, their words cutting deeper each time. I felt like I was being suffocated, my dreams and aspirations trampled under their relentless criticism. "Look, I don't need this," I finally said, standing up. "I don't need to justify my career to anyone." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Oh, so now you're getting defensive? Classic. When you can't face the truth, you just run away." I bit back a sharp retort, knowing it would only fuel their fire. Mrs. Thompson, sensing my defeat, added one last jab. "Think about what we said, Mary. It's for your own good. You can thank us later when you're living in the real world." With that, they left, leaving me alone in my office, surrounded by my books, my work, my world. But their words echoed in the room, each syllable a reminder of how little they understood or respected me. I wondered how much longer I could endure this environment, where my aspirations were nothing but a source of ridicule. The future, once bright with possibilities, now seemed dim and uncertain. It was a typical Saturday morning, the kind that usually promised relaxation and peace. But for me, it heralded the start of the dreaded weekend ritual. The clock had barely struck 10 when I heard the familiar commotion at the front door. It was Susan, Alex's sister, with her 3 kids in tow. "Hey, Mary," Susan called out cheerily as she barged in, the kids already scattering to different corners of the house. "Hope we're not too early." I forced a smile, hiding my dismay. "No, not at all. Good morning, everyone." Susan, oblivious to my discomfort, plopped herself on the sofa. "Phew, what a week. I'm beat. The kids have been driving me up the wall. Thank God for Saturdays, right?" I nodded, a sense of resignation settling in. "Right. Would you like some coffee? That'd be great, thanks, she said, already engrossed in her phone. As I made my way to the kitchen, dodging toys and narrowly avoiding a collision with the youngest, I couldn't help but feel like an unpaid nanny and housekeeper. By the time I returned with the coffee, the living room resembled a war zone. Susan looked up, unfazed by the chaos. "Oh, Mary, could you whip up some of your pancakes? The kids are starving." It wasn't a request, it was an expectation. "Sure, I'll get started on that," I replied, my weekend plans vanishing like smoke. The kitchen became my battleground as I juggled pancakes, coffee, and managing the kids. Amidst the flipping and serving, Alex sauntered in, his expression sour. "Mary, why do you always buy these expensive ingredients? We need to cut down on expenses," he grumbled, eyeing the breakfast spread. I sighed, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Alex, your sister and her kids eat here every weekend. It adds up." He shrugged, dismissive. "Well, they're family. You can make do with less fancy stuff. Save some money." The rest of the day passed in a blur of cooking, cleaning, and catering to endless demands. By the time Susan herded her kids out the door, I was drained, both physically and emotionally. As I slumped onto the couch, Alex walked over, a frown on his face. "You know, you have to save some money on my nephews and my sister." I looked at him, incredulous. "Me? You're the one who never says no to her. And you criticize me for spending too much?" He rolled his eyes. "Just trying to help you manage better. You could learn to be more economical, you know." The irony of his words was almost laughable. There I was, running a weekend daycare and diner, and he was lecturing me on being economical. I wanted to scream, to tell him how unfair it all was. But I knew it would fall on deaf ears. The house was finally quiet, a stark contrast to the usual daytime chaos. It was my time, the only time I could dedicate to my writing without interruptions. The clock ticked past midnight as I settled into my office, the soft glow of the computer screen my only companion. As I lost myself in the world of my creation, the door creaked open. Alex stood there, his face a mix of annoyance and fatigue. "Mary, are you seriously still up? You know how much this will spike our electricity bill?" I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my cool. "It's the only time I have, Alex. You know how hectic it gets during the day." He leaned against the doorframe, his expression hardening. "Hectic? You mean, taking care of your family? That's what you're supposed to do, Mary. And this night owl routine, it's not helping. Think about the bills, for once." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The bills? Really, Alex? That's your concern right now? Not the fact that I'm sacrificing my sleep, my health, to pursue my career? He rolled his eyes. "Career? You mean this little hobby of yours? Come on, Mary. Be realistic. You need to get your priorities straight." I felt a surge of frustration. This hobby of mine is important to me, Alex. It's my passion, my work. Can't you see that? He shook his head, dismissive. "All I see is unnecessary expenses and a wife who's more interested in her fantasies than her family." The hurt from his words was palpable. I stood up, facing him. "My writing is part of who I am, Alex. I can't just give it up because you think it's impractical." He snorted. "Impractical is an understatement. It's a waste of time and money. You could be doing something more productive, you know." I felt a lump in my throat, the words stinging like a physical blow. I am being productive, in my own way. Why can't you understand that? Alex shrugged, a cold, indifferent gesture. Maybe I would, if it actually brought in some real money. Until then, it's just a nuisance. With that, he turned and left, leaving me alone in the dimly lit room. The words on the screen blurred as tears pricked my eyes. I was struggling to keep my dream alive, and the person who was supposed to support me the most just didn't get it. The kitchen was stifling, the air thick with tension. I was stirring the pot when Alex came in, his mother, Mrs. Thompson, trailing behind him like a shadow. The news he dropped was like a bombshell. Susan and her husband are taking off for 2 weeks. They need us to watch the kids, Alex announced, a note of finality in his voice. I froze, spoon in hand. 2 weeks? That's a huge ask, Alex. Mrs. Thompson chimed in immediately, her tone sharp. It's family, Mary. You can't say no to family. I could feel the frustration building up. But my writing, I have deadlines. I can't be a full-time babysitter. Alex scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You're writing? Come on, Mary. It's not like you're penning the next bestseller. Family comes first. I turned to Mrs. Thompson, seeking some support. Maybe the kids could stay with you? She recoiled as if I'd suggested something outrageous. Me? Look after 3 young ones at my age? Absolutely not. I've done my time raising kids. Desperate, I grasped at another solution. What about hiring a nanny then? Just for those 2 weeks. Both of them looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. A nanny? Mrs. Thompson spat out the word. Why waste money on that when you're already here? Alex nodded in agreement. Exactly. We're not made of money, Mary. You need to be sensible about this. I was incredulous. Sensible? You're asking me to give up 2 weeks of my life, my work, for free, and I'm the one who needs to be sensible? Alex's face hardened. It's not a negotiation, Mary. This is what families do for each other. You're part of this family, or have you forgotten? I felt a surge of anger. No, Alex, I haven't forgotten. But it seems like you've forgotten that I have a life and commitments of my own. Mrs. Thompson snorted. Commitments? To those fanciful scribblings of yours? Don't be so dramatic. It's just 2 weeks of babysitting. Feeling cornered, I raised my voice. It's not just babysitting. It's my time, my career. Why can't either of you understand that? Alex's expression turned cold. Because, Mary, in the real world, people don't get to live in their fantasy land. They make sacrifices. They do what's necessary for family. I was shaking with frustration. And what about what's necessary for me? Don't my dreams and aspirations matter to you at all? He leaned in, his voice a low threat. If you don't do this, Mary, it's over. I'll file for divorce. Is that what you want? I recoiled, his words hitting me like a physical blow. The threat of divorce hung in the air, a brutal ultimatum. The day the kids were supposed to arrive felt like the calm before the storm. I watched from the window as Susan's car pulled up. Out tumbled her 3 little ones, each more energetic than the last. Mrs. Thompson, playing the doting grandmother, welcomed them with open arms. The scene was almost comical, a perfect setup for what I had planned. Mary, darling, could you help with the kids? Mrs. Thompson called out, her voice saccharine sweet. I plastered a smile on my face, hiding my brewing plan. Of course, I'll be right there. As I walked into the living room, the chaos was already unfolding. The kids were running around, and Mrs. Thompson looked like she was barely holding it together. Finally, Mary, I thought you'd never come, she snapped, her kind facade slipping. Alex walked in, his expression a mix of annoyance and relief. Mary, make sure they don't wreck the place. I'm going to be in my office. I nodded, my heart racing with anticipation. Actually, I need to go out for a bit. I'll be back soon. Alex's face twisted into a scowl. Go out? Now? Are you kidding me, Mary? You can't leave us with all this. I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. It's just for a bit, Alex. I need to buy some groceries. You'll manage, won't you? Mrs. Thompson glared at me. You're being completely irresponsible, Mary. This is not the time for your little shopping trips. Ignoring her, I grabbed my purse. I won't be long. Keep an eye on the kids. I couldn't help but let out a laugh as I closed the door behind me. The look on their faces was priceless. I didn't go shopping. Instead, I headed straight to the apartment I had rented days before. I had moved all my belongings there when no one was home. It was my escape, my fresh start. Sitting in my new, empty apartment, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The laughter, the sense of freedom was exhilarating. I was finally free from their suffocating grip. I knew Alex would find the divorce papers I left in my office. I imagined his shock, his anger, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had taken control of my life again. The phone rang incessantly, messages flooded in: Alex, Mrs. Thompson, even Susan. But I ignored them all. I was done with their drama, their selfishness. That night, I lay in my new bed, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos of my former life. I smiled to myself, thinking about Alex and Mrs. Thompson struggling with the kids. It was their turn to feel overwhelmed, to be pushed to their limits. The aftermath of my departure turned out to be more dramatic than any scene from my books. My phone buzzed constantly with updates from various friends who couldn't resist sharing the chaos unfolding at my former residence. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, the phone rang with an all-too-familiar number. It was Alex, and from the background noise, I could tell the situation at home was far from under control. "Mary, you have to come back. These kids are monsters." Alex's voice was desperate, strained with frustration. I could hear the sounds of things crashing and children screaming. A smirk crept onto my face. "Really, Alex? Sounds like you're having a fun time." "This isn't funny, Mary. My mom is losing her mind, and I can't handle this alone," he pleaded. I leaned back, enjoying the sweet taste of retribution. "Well, Alex, you should have thought about that before. I'm not your nanny or your maid." There was a pause, and then he said, "I'm sorry, okay? I should have listened to you, respected your work. Please, just come back." The apology, so rare from Alex, didn't stir any sympathy in me. "Sorry doesn't fix everything, Alex. I told you what would happen. I'm done being taken for granted." I hung up, cutting off his protests. The satisfaction was short-lived, though, replaced by a sense of peace and freedom. A few days later, I met up with Lucy for coffee. "So, I heard Mrs. Thompson called Susan, demanding she come back early to take her kids," Lucy said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. I laughed, sipping my coffee. "Yeah, Susan refused. Said she needed the break. Can you imagine the showdown at that house?" Lucy chuckled. "And your book? It's a hit, Mary. Everyone's talking about it." I smiled, feeling a sense of achievement wash over me. "I put everything into it. It's my best work yet." Lucy leaned in, lowering her voice. "The main villain, she's a lot like your mother-in-law, isn't she?" I raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk on my lips. "Is she?" I hadn't noticed. As I walked back to my apartment, I thought about the journey I had been on. Leaving Alex and his controlling family was the best decision I had ever made. I was finally living for myself, my dreams. My latest book was just the start. The villain, reminiscent of Mrs. Thompson, was a hit with the readers. My friends saw the resemblance immediately, but for me, it was more than that. It was a cathartic release, a way to close a painful chapter of my life.
Hey, there, name's Julia. I'm 35, work as a school teacher, and I'm married to Mark. He's a big-shot manager at some corporate firm, rakes in a good amount of cash. We've been hitched for about 5 years now. Mark's got a son from his previous marriage, kid's name is John, he's 12. Let me paint you a picture of our lives. I'm as normal as they come, got a steady job, a home, a man I love, and a kid who isn't mine but I've come to love him like my own. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, it ain't all sunshine and rainbows. Mark and I have been trying to have a kid of our own. Month after month, the same routine. The hope, the anticipation, and then the crushing disappointment. The worst part of it all? Mark points the finger at me. One evening, Mark comes home, his face is like a thundercloud. He throws his briefcase on the couch, loosens his tie, and pours himself a stiff drink. I'm in the kitchen, trying to cook dinner, trying to ignore the tension that's thick in the air. He takes a sip of his drink, then turns to me, his eyes hard. "Julia," he says, his voice cold, "I have a kid. I didn't have any issues with Linda. It's you who can't." His voice trails off, but the message is loud and clear. I'm the problem. His folks, they're no better. They echo his sentiments. I still remember a family dinner at their place. Mark's mom, a stern woman with a sharp tongue, looks at me across the table and says, "Linda gave us a grandson. We thought you'd give us a grandchild too, Julia. But it seems we were wrong." The room goes quiet, and I feel like I've been slapped. I can't say anything, can't do anything. I just sit there, my face hot, my heart pounding. Then there's Linda, Mark's ex, the mother of John. She's like a specter that haunts our lives. She's a barmaid, always dressed to kill, always the life of the party. I've met her many times. She's got a way about her, a way that draws people in. She knows how to talk, how to charm. She's got Mark's folks eating out of her hand. I remember one time she came over to pick up John. Mark's mom was there, and they greeted each other like long-lost friends. I watched from the doorway, feeling like a stranger in my own home. "Julia, we were just looking at old photos. You should join us." Linda's voice, sugary sweet, cuts through the silence of the room. She's sitting on our couch, flipping through our family album with Mark's mother. I stand in the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. I feel like an intruder in my own home. I plaster a smile on my face and walk over to them. The photos are a stark reminder of a past I was never part of. Mark and Linda, young and in love. John, a chubby baby in Linda's arms. Linda and Mark's mom, laughing over something, looking like best friends. It's like a punch to the gut. John was such a cute baby, Linda coos, pointing at a photo. I force a laugh, nodding in agreement. I feel Mark's mom's eyes on me, scrutinizing, judging. The room is filled with an uncomfortable silence. I excuse myself, mumbling something about checking on dinner. Mark, meanwhile, is a ghost in our lives. He's always at work, always at the golf club, always on his computer. He's there, but he's not really there, you know? He pays his alimony to Linda, buys John the latest gadgets, tries to be the cool dad. But when it comes to me, to us, he's always too tired, always too busy. One night, he comes home late from the club, the smell of alcohol heavy on his breath. I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, a report card in my hand. "Mark," I say, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk about John's grades." He grunts, his eyes still closed. "Not now, Julia," he mumbles, "I'm tired." "But Mark," I insist, "his grades are slipping. We need to." "Julia," he snaps, his voice harsh. I said not now. He turns over, his back to me, and that's the end of our conversation. Later that week, I'm at the grocery store, picking up some stuff for dinner. I bump into Linda in the frozen food aisle. She's got a cart full of junk food, probably for John. He's always been a picky eater, always preferred junk over home-cooked meals. I try to keep my distance, but she spots me. "Julia," she calls out, a smirk on her face. "Shopping for dinner?" I nod, forcing a smile. "Just the usual stuff," I reply, keeping my voice casual. She laughs, a high-pitched, annoying sound. "You know, John loves my spaghetti. You should try making it sometime." Her words are like a slap in the face. But I keep my cool, nodding and mumbling something about trying it out. I rush home, my mind a whirl of thoughts. I'm left to pick up the pieces. I'm left to play mom to John, to help him with his homework, to attend parent-teacher meetings, to deal with his mood swings. I'm left to clean up Mark's mess, to play the dutiful wife, to put on a happy face when all I want to do is scream. I'm sitting at my desk, scrolling through my phone when a message pops up. It's from my friend, Jenna. There's a photo attached. I open it, and my heart stops. It's Mark, my Mark, with his arm around Linda. They're in a bar, laughing, looking cozy. I can't breathe, can't think. I feel like I've been punched in the gut. I wait for Mark to come home, the photo burning a hole in my pocket. He walks in, tired, a little drunk. I take a deep breath, steeling myself. Mark, I say, my voice steady, we need to talk. He grunts, dropping his keys on the table. What is it, Julia? He asks, his voice tired. I hold up the photo, my hand shaking. He looks at it, his face blank. Then he laughs, a loud, harsh sound. So what? He asks, his voice cold. Linda and I are friends. We have a kid together. His words hit me like a slap in the face. Friends, I repeat, my voice a whisper. He nods, his face hard. Yeah, Julia, friends. We have a kid together. We have a history together. What's your problem? I feel tears prick at my eyes, but I blink them back. I won't let him see me cry. My problem, I say, my voice rising, is that you're my husband, Mark. You're supposed to care about me, about us. He scoffs, rolling his eyes. Oh, Julia, he says, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Always the drama queen. I'm bored, Julia. Bored with this, with us. Linda, she's fun. She's exciting. She understands me. I feel like I've been punched in the gut. I can't breathe, can't think, but I won't let him see me break. I won't give him the satisfaction. Fine, I say, my voice cold. If that's how you feel, then maybe we should end this. He looks at me, his face blank. Then he shrugs, a casual, cruel gesture. Maybe we should, he says, his voice cold. He walks away, leaving me standing there, the photo still clutched in my hand. The next day, I decide to confront Linda. I find her at the bar, serving drinks, laughing with the customers. She looks up as I walk in, her smile fading. Julia, she says, her voice cautious. What brings you here? I slam the photo on the bar, my heart pounding in my chest. What's this, Linda? I ask, my voice steady. She looks at the photo, then at me. She shrugs, a smirk on her face. Mark and I are friends, Julia, she says, her voice casual. We have a kid together. I feel a surge of anger, of betrayal. But I keep my cool, keep my voice steady. He's my husband, Linda, I say, my voice cold, and I won't let you ruin my marriage. She laughs, a harsh, cruel sound. Oh, Julia, she says, her voice dripping with sarcasm, your marriage was ruined the moment you walked into it. Mark's always been mine. He always will be. I feel a surge of anger, of determination. I won't let her win, won't let her destroy my life. We'll see about that, Linda, I say, my voice cold. We'll see about that. I turn and walk away, leaving her standing there, the photo still on the bar. I've got a fight in me, and I'm not going down without a fight. It's a quiet afternoon and I'm sitting with John, Mark's son, at our kitchen table. We've got his school books spread out between us, and I'm helping him with his math homework. John and I have always had a good relationship. He's a good kid, smart and kind. He's nothing like his mother, thank God. Julia, he says, his voice quiet, why does 2x plus 3 equal 5? I explain the equation to him, simplifying it so he understands. He nods, scribbling down the answer in his notebook. We work in silence for a while, the only sound the scratch of his pencil and the occasional sigh of frustration. Then, out of the blue, he says, Dad and Mom meet a lot, you know? I freeze, my heart pounding in my chest. I force a smile, pretending not to be affected. Oh? I ask, my voice casual. That's nice. He nods, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. Yeah, he says, they meet at the park, at the mall. They talk a lot. They laugh a lot. His words are like a punch in the gut. But I can't let him see my pain. I can't let him know how much his words hurt. John, I say, my voice steady, your dad and I, we're good, okay? We're happy. Your mom, she's just a part of his past. He looks at me, his eyes wide. Okay, he says, his voice small, okay, Julia. Just then, the doorbell rings. It's Linda, here to pick up John. I stand, my heart pounding in my chest. John runs to the door, excited to see his mom. I follow him, my mind racing. I have to confront her, have to tell her to stay away from Mark. Hey, John, Linda says, her voice sweet. Ready to go? John nods, running to get his bag. Linda turns to me, her eyes cold. Julia, she says, her voice icy, we need to talk. I nod, my heart pounding in my chest. Yes, I say, my voice steady, we do. We step outside, away from John. I take a deep breath, steeling myself. Linda, I say, my voice cold, you need to stay away from Mark. She laughs, a harsh, cruel sound. Why? She asks, her voice mocking. Because he's your husband. Because you love him? I feel a surge of anger, of frustration. But I keep my cool, keep my voice steady. Yes, I say, my voice cold, because he's my husband. Because I love him. She smirks, her eyes cold. Oh, Julia, she says, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You're so naive. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. But I won't let her see me break. I won't give her the satisfaction. I'll fight for him, Linda, I say, my voice cold, I won't let you take him away from me. She laughs, a harsh, cruel sound. Oh, Julia, she says, her voice mocking. You don't stand a chance. I have John. He's my trump card. Her words are like a punch in the gut. I can't breathe, can't think. But I won't let her see me break. I won't give her the satisfaction. We'll see about that, Linda, I say, my voice cold. We'll see about that. She leaves, taking John with her. I'm left standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. But I won't let her win. I won't let her take Mark away from me. The days roll on, and I find myself in the park with John again. The sun is shining, casting long shadows on the ground. Kids are laughing, playing. It's a normal day, just like any other. But inside, I'm a whirl of thoughts and emotions. John and I have a routine. We walk around the park, chat about school, friends, video games. He's a good kid, easy to talk to. I've grown fond of him. He's not my son, but I care about him. And that's why the revelation I'm about to stumble upon will hit me so hard. We get back from the park, and it's time for homework. John's got a biology assignment, something about genetics and blood types. I help him out, explaining the basics. Type O, type A, type B, type AB, positive, negative, and so on. It's a bit complicated, but John's a quick learner. The assignment is a simple one. If a mother and a father both have type A blood, what blood type would their child most likely have? The answer is, of course, type A. John gets it right, and I give him a thumbs up. Then, he looks at me with a puzzled expression. But, Julia, he says, I have type B blood. I freeze. My heart pounds in my chest. That's impossible. Unless Mark isn't John's father. I stare at John, my mind racing. But I can't let him see my shock. I can't let him know what I'm thinking. Oh, I say, forcing a casual tone, that's interesting. Who told you that? My doctor, he replies, at my last checkup. I nod, trying to keep my face neutral. Well, sometimes these things can be confusing. Let's just focus on the homework for now, okay? He nods, and we go back to the assignment. But my mind is elsewhere. I'm thinking about Mark, about Linda, about the truth. I'm thinking about how I'm going to deal with this. A few hours later, Linda comes to pick up John. I watch as they drive away, my heart heavy in my chest. I'm not sure what to do, how to handle this. But I know I can't ignore it. I can't pretend like nothing's wrong. John, bless his heart, tells Linda about the genetics problem we solved. He's smiling, excited about his new knowledge. But Linda, she goes pale. She looks at me, her eyes wide. I pretend not to notice. I pretend like everything's fine. But it's not. I've discovered a secret, a truth that could change everything. And I'm not sure what to do with it, but one thing's for sure. I'm not going to let Linda win. I'm not going to let her take Mark away from me. I'm not sure what the future holds. I'm not sure what this revelation means for me, for Mark, for John. But I'll face it head on. I'll fight for what's right. I'll fight for the truth. It was just another day. I was in the kitchen, cooking up some breakfast. Mark was sitting at the table, reading the newspaper. John was upstairs, getting ready for school. It was just like any other day, but inside, I was a mess. "Julia, where's the butter?" Mark asked, not looking up from his newspaper. "In the fridge, where it always is," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He grunted and got up to get it himself. I watched him, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't help but wonder if he knew, if he suspected anything. John came down the stairs, his hair still wet from the shower. He grabbed a piece of toast and started to eat. "John, sit down and eat properly," I said, trying to sound stern. He just shrugged and kept eating. He was always like that, always in a hurry. I watched him, my mind racing. I couldn't help but wonder if he knew, if he suspected anything. After breakfast, Mark left for work and John left for school. I was alone in the house, just me and my thoughts. I went up to John's bathroom, my heart pounding in my chest. I stared at his hairbrush, my hand shaking. I reached out and pulled out a few strands of hair. I put them in a small plastic bag, then did the same with Mark's hairbrush. I sent the hairs off for a DNA test. It was a long shot, but I had to know. I had to know if Mark was John's father. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day, I checked the mail, my heart pounding in my chest. Every day, I was disappointed, but I didn't give up. I couldn't. Not now. Finally, the results arrived. I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the moment of truth. I ripped open the envelope, my hands shaking. I pulled out the paper, my eyes scanning the words. And then, I saw it. The results. The truth. I won't tell you what it says. Not yet. That's a story for another day, but I will tell you this. The truth changed everything. It was a bombshell, a revelation. It turned my world upside down. That day started off pretty ordinary. Mark came home early, and he wasn't alone. Linda was with him, and so were his parents. They had that look, you know the one. The look that says, "We're here, and we're taking over." I was sitting on the couch, holding on to the DNA test results. Mark cleared his throat. "Julia," he started, "I want a divorce." I didn't react. I didn't need to. I knew this was coming. I had been preparing for this. So, I just sat there, staring at him. Linda had this nasty grin on her face. "Guess you're not so special after all, huh?" she said. "Just a gray mouse." Mark's parents were nodding, looking pleased. They never liked me. They thought I was beneath their son. But I didn't care. I didn't care what they thought of me. Not anymore. I stood up, my hands shaking. I walked over to Mark, the DNA test results still in my hands. "You want a divorce?" I asked. "Fine. But first, you might want to take a look at this." I handed him the DNA test results. He took them, looking confused. He read them, his eyes getting wider with every word. This can't be right," he stammered. John's not my son? I nodded. That's right, I said, John's not your son. Linda looked shocked. She grabbed the test results, her hands shaking. She read them, her face going pale. No, she whispered, no, this can't be true. I didn't cheat on you, Mark. I swear. But Mark wasn't having it. You're lying, he yelled, you did this, Julia. You did this to get rid of them. His parents chimed in, siding with Linda. Linda wouldn't cheat. This is your doing, Julia. I shrugged. Fine. I said. Let's do another test then. Let's see if these results hold up. All eyes turned to Linda. She was pale, shaking. No, she said, no more tests. I smirked. Why not, Linda? If you're so sure John is Mark's, what's the harm in another test? Linda broke down, tears streaming down her face. Okay. I cheated. John isn't Mark's. Mark was furious. You lied to me, he said, his voice cold. You lied to me for years. I want all my money back. Every single penny. His parents looked shocked. They tried to argue, tried to deny it. But it was no use. The truth was out. And nothing they could say or do would change that. I watched them, feeling a sense of satisfaction. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I felt powerful. I'd done it. I'd finally left the big mansion, the shimmering chandeliers, the empty glamour, and the web of lies. I'd traded it all for a small, homely apartment in a quiet part of town. It was a far cry from the opulence I was used to, but it was real. It was mine. I'd filled it with second-hand furniture, a few potted plants, and a lot of hope. I continued to teach at the local school, and those kids, they were my lifeline. They kept me grounded, kept me real. Mark, my ex-husband, was another story. He'd finally severed ties with Linda, his ex-wife. He'd come to see her true colors, but it was too late. He had washed his hands off John, Linda's son. Poor kid, he wasn't even Mark's own, but he had been caught in the crossfire. But as much as I tried to forget, the past had a way of sneaking up on me. I missed John, not Mark, never Mark. But John, that kid had wormed his way into my heart. I loved him like he was my own. And it hurt like hell knowing that I wasn't going to see him grow up. Out of the blue, Linda called. You've ruined my life, she accused, her voice shrill and hysterical. You've ruined John's life. I was taken aback, but I didn't let her get to me. Look who's talking, Linda, I retorted. You're the one who brewed this storm. You can't blame anyone else for the rain. She hung up on me. Good riddance. Mark was suing Linda, trying to get back all the money he'd spent on John. His parents were backing him up, of course. They were always on his side. The whole thing was a mess, a dirty, ugly mess. I wanted no part of it. I had my own life to live, my own battles to fight. I was done with them, done with their lies and their games. But I couldn't help but think about John. I hoped he was okay. I hoped he knew that I still cared about him, that I still loved him. I hoped that one day, he would understand why I did what I did. For now, though, I had to keep moving forward. I had to make a life for myself, a life that was mine and mine alone. I was Julia, and this was my story. I was no one's victim, no one's fool. I was a survivor.
Hi there. I'm Linda. My life took a pretty unexpected turn when I married Tom. He was a great guy, a widower with a sweet little girl named Sarah. She was 7 when I came into the picture, her mom having left when she was just a toddler. I walked into their lives hoping to make things better, to bring some love and stability. But, let's just say, things didn't go as planned. The first time I met Sarah, I remember trying to break the ice. Hey, Sarah, I've heard so much about you. I brought some cookies. Do you like chocolate chip? I asked, holding out a plate. She just stared at the cookies, then at me, with this look of total indifference. "I guess," she finally muttered, taking one, but avoiding eye contact. Tom smiled apologetically. "She's a bit shy around new people. Give it time, Linda." I wanted to be patient, to understand what she was going through. But it wasn't long before I noticed her coldness wasn't just shyness. Things got even more complicated when our son Danny was born. Sarah's behavior took a turn for the worse. She seemed to resent him, seeing him as a threat to her relationship with her dad. One evening, I found Danny crying in his room. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, concerned. "Sarah said I'm a mistake and that Daddy doesn't love me," he sobbed. My heart sank. I confronted Sarah about it. "Why would you say something like that to Danny? He's your little brother." "He's not my brother. You're not my mom," she snapped back, her eyes defiant. Tom tried to mediate things, but it was like walking on eggshells. "Sarah, Linda's just trying to be a good mom to both of you." Sarah would roll her eyes. "She's not my mom. Don't forget that." It was tough. Every attempt I made to bond with her was met with resistance or outright hostility. And it wasn't just within our four walls. Her grandparents, Tom's parents, were another story. I remember one Sunday dinner, Tom's mom pulled me aside. "Linda, you need to try harder with Sarah. She feels left out since Danny came along." I was frustrated. "I've been trying, but she won't let me in. It's like she's decided to hate me no matter what I do." Tom's dad chimed in. "She's just a child, Linda. You're the adult here. You should make more of an effort." It felt like a no-win situation. I was trying my best, but nothing seemed to work. Sarah had built a wall around herself, and I just couldn't find a way through. As she grew into her teens, Sarah's behavior only got more challenging. She would flout rules, talk back, and her attitude towards me became more hostile. I felt like I was failing her, failing our family. But I wasn't about to give up. I just hoped that someday, somehow, we'd find a way to come together as a real family. Sarah's teenage years were like navigating a minefield. Every conversation felt like a potential explosion. I remember one morning trying to talk to her about school. "Sarah, why weren't you in school yesterday?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She just shrugged, pouring herself a bowl of cereal. "Didn't feel like going." "But your education is important," I persisted. "You can't just skip school whenever you want." Sarah rolled her eyes, a smirk playing on her lips. "What are you gonna do, ground me? You're not my mom." I felt a flash of frustration. "I'm not trying to replace your mom, Sarah. I just care about you." She scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Yeah, right. You just want to make sure your perfect little family looks good." I was at a loss. How do you reach someone who's determined to keep you out? Tom, bless his heart, tried to bridge the gap between us. One evening, he sat down with Sarah, trying to have a heart-to-heart. "Sarah, Linda's just trying to help," he said gently. "She cares about you." Sarah's response was cold and bitter. "She's not my mom, Dad. Stop trying to make her into something she's not." Tom looked defeated, his usual optimism faltering. "I know she's not your mom, but she's part of our family now. We need to try to get along." Sarah just got up and left the room, her silence speaking volumes. Tom's parents were another hurdle. They seemed to believe that I could do no right by Sarah. During a family get-together, Tom's mom pulled me aside again. "Linda, you need to be more understanding of Sarah's feelings," she said, her tone implying I was being heartless. I felt my patience wearing thin. "I've tried, but she won't let me in. It's like she hates me." Tom's mom just shook her head. "She's a sensitive girl. You need to try harder." It was like talking to a brick wall. No matter what I said, it seemed to fall on deaf ears. They had made up their minds about me, and nothing I could say or do would change that. The tension in our house was palpable. Danny, who was just a little boy, often got caught in the crossfire of Sarah's outbursts. He didn't understand why his sister was so hostile. "Why does Sarah hate us, Mom?" Danny asked one night, his little face scrunched up in confusion. I hugged him close, trying to shield him from the harsh reality. "She doesn't hate us, Danny. She's just going through a tough time." But even I wasn't convinced by my own words. Sarah's behavior was more than just teenage rebellion. It felt personal, targeted. And I couldn't help but feel responsible, like I was the catalyst for all this discord. I lay awake many nights, wondering where we had gone wrong. Was there something I could have done differently? Some way I could have reached out to her that I hadn't thought of? The questions haunted me, but answers were nowhere to be found. The day I got the call from the local police station about Sarah, my stepdaughter, felt like a punch in the gut. I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone vibrated relentlessly. Excusing myself, I stepped out to answer what I assumed was another of Sarah's school-related issues. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Officer Martinez. We've detained your stepdaughter, Sarah. She's involved in a vandalism incident." The officer's voice was firm, almost disapproving. "Vandalism? Are you sure we're talking about the same Sarah?" I stammered, my mind racing. "Yes, ma'am. Sarah Johnson, 15 years old. We need you to come and pick her up." I felt a mix of anger and embarrassment. "I'll be right there," I replied, feeling the eyes of my colleagues on me as I hurried out. At the station, Sarah was slouched in a chair, her arms crossed, an air of defiance about her. She looked up as I approached, her expression one of annoyance rather than remorse. "Sarah, what in the world were you thinking?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, relax, Linda. It's not like I killed someone. We just sprayed some paint. No big deal." I was aghast. "Not a big deal?" "Sarah, this is illegal. You could be in serious trouble." Sarah snorted, standing up. "Well, I'm not. Can we go now? This place is depressing." The car ride home was a tense silence. I knew this was a conversation for both Tom and me to handle, but with him away on a business trip, I felt overwhelmed and alone. That evening, with Danny asleep, I made a call to Tom. "Tom, we have a serious problem with Sarah," I said, my voice shaky. "I know, Linda, the school has called me a few times already." "What's happened now?" Tom sounded tired. "She was detained by the police today, Tom. For vandalism," I explained, the severity of the situation hanging heavily in the air. There was a pause on the other end. "Jesus, Linda. I don't even know what to say." "We need to get her help, Tom. Therapy, counseling, something. She's out of control," I urged, feeling desperate. Tom sighed, the sound heavy and defeated. "Okay, I'll be back in 2 days. We'll sort this out." I hung up, feeling a small sense of relief, but mostly dread for what was to come. When Tom finally sat down with Sarah to discuss therapy, it was like igniting a fuse. "I'm not going to any shrink," Sarah spat, her eyes blazing. "You can't make me." Tom, trying to remain calm, countered, "It's not about making you, Sarah. It's about helping you." Sarah laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Help me? Please? You just want to dump me on someone else, because you can't deal with me." Tom's patience was wearing thin. "That's not true, Sarah, and you know it. We're worried about you." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Save it, Dad. I'm not your little project. I'm out of here." And with that, she stormed out, the door slamming shut behind her. The next thing we knew, she was at her grandparents', refusing to come home or even talk to us. Tom and I were left in a state of shock and helplessness. Our family felt like it was falling apart at the seams, and at the center of it all was Sarah, a teenage girl we just couldn't seem to reach no matter how hard we tried. Things hit rock bottom the day Sarah decided she'd had enough of our rules and bolted to her grandparents'. Tom and I were left in a state of shock and dismay, our family home feeling emptier than ever. Sitting in the living room, Tom kept glancing at his phone, the silence between us heavy and uncomfortable. I can't believe she'd just up and leave like that," he said, his voice a mix of frustration and disbelief. I exhaled deeply, feeling a storm of emotions brewing inside me. "Tom, she's out of control. We can't just let her walk all over us. It's not right." Tom's expression was one of defeat. "I know, Linda, I know. But what can we do? She's just not listening to us." Determined to get some answers, we decided to call Tom's parents. The conversation, however, quickly turned sour. "Mom, this is Tom. We need to talk about Sarah," Tom began, trying to keep his voice level. His mom was quick to defend Sarah. "Oh, Tom, she's just so distraught. She feels like Linda's pushing her away, trying to send her to a therapist like she's some sort of problem." I couldn't keep silent. "That's not it at all. She's been getting into trouble, and we're worried about her," I snapped back, my patience wearing thin. Tom's dad jumped in, his voice bristling with irritation. "Linda, you're just not understanding her. She's a delicate girl, and you've been too harsh." I felt my blood boil. Too harsh? She's been acting out, breaking laws. We're trying to do what's best for her. "Well, she's staying here now. We'll handle it our way," Tom's mom retorted, her tone dismissive. Tom and I exchanged a look of frustration and helplessness. "You're just going to let her skip school and hang out with God knows who?" Tom challenged, his voice rising. "She's just going through a phase. She'll settle down," his dad said nonchalantly, as if Sarah's behavior was no big deal. After the call, the sense of powerlessness was overwhelming. It was as if Sarah had everyone wrapped around her finger, and we were the villains for trying to impose some boundaries. In the following days, Sarah's absence cast a shadow over our home. Her room, untouched and gathering dust, was a constant reminder of the rift in our family. We sent money to Tom's parents for Sarah's expenses, but it felt like throwing money into a bottomless pit. There was no improvement, no change, just silent acceptance of her rebellion. One evening, as I tucked our son Danny into bed, his little face clouded with confusion. "Mom, why did Sarah leave? Doesn't she like us anymore?" I stroked his hair gently, fighting back my own emotions. "Danny, it's complicated. Sarah's dealing with a lot right now. But we love her, and we're here for her whenever she's ready." Walking out of Danny's room, the weight of our family's situation hit me full force. We were a family torn apart, not by distance, but by defiance and misunderstanding. And at the heart of it all was Sarah, a girl I had hoped to embrace as my daughter, now a stranger living under another roof. For years, our house had been calm, almost too calm, without Sarah's tumultuous presence. Then, out of the blue, she showed up at our doorstep, her announcement as unexpected as her visit. Tom and I were in the kitchen when she walked in, a confident, almost brash look on her face. "Hey," she said casually, as if she hadn't been away for years. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Tom asked, surprise written all over his face. "I've got news. I'm getting married," she declared, a smug smile playing on her lips. Tom and I exchanged glances, a mixture of shock and cautious optimism in our eyes. "That's great, Sarah. Congratulations," I managed to say, though a part of me remained wary. "Yeah, thanks. But here's the thing," Sarah continued, getting straight to the point. "I need money for the wedding." Tom's expression hardened slightly. "Money? Sarah, you haven't been home in years, and now you show up asking for money?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "Come on, Dad. It's not like you can't afford it. And it's not like I'm asking for much." I could feel the tension in the room escalating. "Sarah, it's not just about the money. You can't just walk back into our lives and expect us to." "Look, Linda, Sarah cut me off, her tone dismissive. I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking Dad for a favor. The audacity of her request left me stunned. Sarah, we're a family. We make these decisions together, I said firmly. Sarah scoffed. Please, you're not my family. You're just the woman my dad married. Tom intervened, trying to keep the peace. Sarah, that's enough. Linda's right. We're a family, and we make decisions together. She looked at Tom, her expression softening slightly. Dad, please. It's my wedding. I just want it to be perfect. Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. We'll think about it, Sarah. But you can't just expect us to hand over the money without some discussion. Sarah's demeanor shifted then, as if realizing her approach wasn't working. I know. I'm sorry. I really want this to be special. After she left, Tom and I had a long talk. Maybe this is a chance for us to mend things, I suggested, hopeful yet cautious. Tom nodded slowly. Maybe. But we're not just writing her a blank check. We need to be involved in the planning, make sure the money is used appropriately. I agreed. Despite Sarah's brashness, this could be our opportunity to bridge the gap that had grown between us. Maybe, just maybe, we could turn a new page with her. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Sarah's sudden return and request felt like just the calm before another storm. The days leading up to Sarah's wedding were a whirlwind of preparations. Tom and I decided to contribute generously to her wedding fund, hoping it would be a step towards mending our fractured relationship. But things took a shocking turn just a few days before the wedding. I decided to call the wedding planner to check on how the preparations were going. The conversation started off normal enough, but I could sense something was off. Hi, this is Linda Johnson, Sarah's stepmom. I'm just calling to check on the wedding preparations, I said, trying to sound casual. The wedding planner's voice was tense, hesitant. Oh, Mrs. Johnson, yes, the preparations are going well, but... But what? I pressed, a knot forming in my stomach. There was a pause, and then she said, I'm not sure how to say this, but Sarah, she's made some changes to the guest list. Changes to the guest list? What kind of changes? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The planner's voice was low, almost apologetic. She's removed you, Mr. Johnson, and Danny from the list. But she's added her biological mother. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Her mother? The one who left her? Yes, and there's something else. The planner continued, her voice hesitant. The budget for the wedding, it's significantly less than the amount you gave her. I was stunned into silence. Sarah had taken the money we gave her for the wedding and spent only a fraction of it, cutting us out of her big day in the process. After hanging up, I confronted Tom with the news. His reaction was one of disbelief and then growing anger. That ungrateful little... Tom started, his fists clenched. Tom, calm down, I said, though I shared his outrage. We need to talk to her about this. When we finally got Sarah on the phone, the conversation was anything but pleasant. Sarah, why did you remove us from the wedding guest list? Tom demanded, his voice tight with anger. Sarah's response was cold and matter-of-fact. Because I don't want your wife there. This is my day, and I'll have who I want. And what about the money? I asked, struggling to keep my composure. You spent only a fraction of what we gave you. That's none of your business, she snapped back. You gave me the money, it's mine to use how I see fit. We were at a loss for words. The audacity of her actions left us both reeling. Tom, in a rare display of fury, made a decision. We're taking back our money, Sarah. We won't support this deceit, he said, his voice resolute. You can't do that, Sarah yelled, her voice shrill with panic. We can, and we will, Tom replied firmly. You've crossed a line, Sarah. The call ended with Sarah hurling insults and accusations at us before hanging up. True to his word, Tom canceled the checks, effectively putting a stop to the wedding plans. We had tried to reach out, to mend bridges, but Sarah's actions had made it clear that some rifts were too deep to heal. The fallout from the canceled wedding hit our family like a hurricane. Sarah's response to our decision was both explosive and bitter. She showed up at our house, her face twisted with rage, hurling accusations and insults. "You've ruined everything," she screamed, her eyes blazing. "This was supposed to be my day, and you destroyed it." "Sarah, you lied to us," Tom countered, his voice firm despite the rising tension. "You deceived us about the wedding, about the money. What did you expect?" "I expected you to back off and let me have my day," she retorted, her fists clenched at her sides. "You excluded us from your wedding, Sarah. You took the money for yourself," I added, trying to reason with her. "Because it's what I deserved. After years of putting up with you," Sarah spat out, her words cutting through the air. The argument escalated until Sarah, in a final burst of anger, stormed out of the house, swearing she'd never forgive us. In the aftermath, Tom and I were left to pick up the pieces. The situation worsened when we received a call from Tom's parents. They were furious, initially blaming us for the wedding debacle, but then, their anger took a different turn. "Linda, Tom, we need to tell you something," Tom's mom said over the phone, her voice shaking. "After Sarah left our house, we discovered she took some of my jewelry. Valuable pieces." Tom and I were stunned into silence. "She stole from you?" Tom finally managed to say, disbelief coloring his tone. "Yes," his dad replied, the disappointment evident in his voice. "We never thought she'd do something like this to us." "Are you going to report it?" I asked, a mix of concern and shock in my voice. "No, we can't bring ourselves to do that to our granddaughter, but we're so hurt," Tom's mom said, her voice breaking. The revelation was a bitter pill to swallow. It was one thing for Sarah to lash out at us, but to betray her own grandparents in such a way was unthinkable. Days turned into weeks, and there was no word from Sarah. Tom held on to hope that she would come to her senses and reach out, but I wasn't so sure. "Tom, do you really think she'll come back after all this?" I asked one evening, as we sat in our quiet living room. Tom looked out the window, a far-off look in his eyes. "I don't know, Linda. I hope she does. I hope she realizes the mistake she's made and wants to make amends." I sighed, feeling a deep sense of uncertainty. "I don't know if she ever will, Tom. The Sarah we knew seems to be long gone." Tom nodded, his expression somber. "Maybe you're right. But she's still my daughter. I can't give up hope." As time passed, the silence from Sarah became a new norm. We heard nothing about her whereabouts or well-being. Tom's parents, too, were left in the dark, their feelings of betrayal mingling with worry for their granddaughter. In our home, life went on. Danny grew older, and we focused our energy on him, ensuring he felt loved and secure. But the shadow of Sarah's actions lingered, a reminder of the broken bridges and unhealed wounds in our family. I often found myself wondering about Sarah, about where she was and what she was doing. My feelings were a complex mix of anger, disappointment, and a faint glimmer of concern. Tom remained hopeful, but deep down, I doubted if Sarah would ever return to us, if she would ever seek the help she so desperately needed. Hey, my name's Margot. Last year, I changed my status to Mrs. and added a wedding band next to my collection of courtroom victories. Slinging arguments before a judge, that's my zone. But dang, I never thought I'd need a defense strategy for family dinners. So, let me put you in the picture. My man, Tom, he's a mama's boy, and I get why. Mrs. Walters, his mom, is the queen bee of their hive. Did the single mom hustle, brought up 2 kids solo. Mad props for that. Sarah, his sister, well, she's another story, thinks she's the center of the universe or something. I remember walking into their place for the first time, Tom's arm around me like he's showing off a trophy. The living room's like a shrine, photos of Tom and Sarah plastered on every surface. It's cozy but feels like stepping onto a movie set where they've been playing house for years, and suddenly I'm the unexpected guest star. Mrs. Walters came at me with this tight-lipped smile. You know the kind, the one that says, "I'm smiling because that's what I'm supposed to do, but I'd rather be scrubbing the bathroom grout with your toothbrush." Dressed in one of those floral numbers that just screamed I'm the matriarch. "Margot, dear, Tom's told us so much about you," she said, sizing me up like I'm a car she's not sure she wants to buy. "Yeah, I've been looking forward to meeting the famous Mrs. Walters. Tom's done nothing but sing your praises," I said, trying to thaw the room a bit. "Oh, how sweet," Sarah chimed in. She'd been eyeing me like a hawk since I walked in. "Tell us, Margot, how's the lawyer life? I picture you in court, like on TV, making bank." "So how much do you actually make?" I almost choked on my spit. Who asks that straight out of the gate? I laughed though, 'cause what else are you gonna do? You know, trade secret and all that," I shot back, not missing a beat. Mrs. Walters picked up the baton like it was a relay race. "But surely you can give us a ballpark figure, for family." Tom shot me that please don't be mad look, but I kept my cool. "If I had $1 for every time someone asked me that, I'd have enough to change the subject," I parried, topping it off with what I hoped was a disarming smile. Mrs. Walters snorted. Yeah, she snorted. "Well, it's no secret what a teacher earns. Right, Tom?" "Mom," Tom sighed. "Let's not do this now." Right, she said, waving her hand like she's dismissing a servant or something. "Anyway, you'll be like family now, sharing is caring and all that." I slid a look at Tom. His help-me face was on full display. I knew then I wasn't just marrying Tom, I was enlisting in some low-key domestic Cold War. Couple weeks in, and I'm standing in our kitchen, apron on, pot simmering, trying out Mrs. Walters' famous chili recipe. Now, Mrs. Walters and Sarah have got this routine. They drop over unannounced like they forgot it ain't their house. "Your chili needs more heat," Mrs. Walters picks at the ladle like she might catch something. "And less salt. Watch your husband's blood pressure." "Got it," I reply. Inside, I'm rolling my eyes so hard I'm seeing my brain. Sarah's there too, all leaned back on a stool like she's the Queen of Sheba. "You see this spot, Margot? Cleanliness is next to godliness, isn't it, Mom?" Mrs. Walters nods like it's gospel and Sarah's high-fiving herself in her head. "Funny, I cleaned this place this morning," I say, swiping the spot off the counter. "Must have missed that one." Tom's in the other room, clueless, probably deep in some video game or sports stats. So, I figure it's high time to fill him in on the home invasions. I poke my head in where he's slouched on the couch. "Hey, you got a sec?" "What's up, babe?" Tom flicks his eyes up for just a moment, poor thing, like he's afraid he might miss a crucial play. "Your mom and Sarah, they come in, take over, nitpick everything I do. It's like they're looking for stuff to complain about," I let it tumble out. Margot, they mean well, you know? They're just..." Tom scratches his head. "I'll talk to them. They'll chill out." Back to the kitchen, and it's like walking into the final round of some cook-off where I'm the only contestant and the judges are out for blood. "So, Margot, when's dinner?" Tom must be starving. Sarah glances at me like I'm the help. Whenever the chili decides it's ready, I shoot back, but I keep my voice light. It's a tightrope walk. Dinner lands on the table, and I'm scanning their faces. Mrs. Walters stirs hers around, inspecting every bean like it holds the secret to the universe. "Bit different from how I make it," Mrs. Walters finally says. "That's code for nice try, but you're no match for me." Tom dives in though, bless him. "Babe, this is awesome. Right, Mom?" "Sakai," Sarah mutters, and Mrs. Walters just shrugs like she's agreeing with the worst food critic. After they leave, Tom's slapping his belly, saying it's all good. I'm watching the door shut behind them, feeling tiny, like I'm losing at some game I didn't sign up to play. The next time they pop over, it's the same old tune, like nothing changed. I must have been dreaming to think a few words from Tom might turn the tide. Still, I ask him to talk to his mother about boundaries. I thought getting hitched was the hard part. Fitting into Tom's family? That's the real challenge. They've got their own idea of family, and I ain't in it, yet. If this is what married life is like, count me out of the honeymoon phase. It was one of those days where the clock seemed to tick slower than syrup drips from a bottle. That's when my phone decided to sing its little heart out. Glancing at the caller ID, my heart sank. It was Mrs. Walters. Again. Margot. Her voice was stern, and it did nothing for my headache. You think you can just snatch Tom away from us, huh? Her words stung like vinegar on a paper cut. I glanced over at Tom, hoping he'd at least flinch at his mother's tone. Nothing. He's glued to the TV screen, a statue with heartbeat. Mrs. Walters, it's not like that. We're just trying to set up some boundaries, I said, my voice squeezed thin. Boundaries? She fumed. That's just a fancy word for shutting us out. You can't do that to us, to me. He's my son. As I blinked back frustration, Tom still silent, looking like someone shrunk his spine in the wash. Listen, it's normal for married folks to want their own space. I tried to keep the edge out of my tone. Space? He's never needed space before you, came her sharp retort. Her voice was a buzzsaw and each word carved up my patience. That was when Tom decided to pipe up, but not to back me up. No. Mom, is everything okay? Margot's not, she's not being unreasonable, I guess, he said, but his voice was like wet cardboard. Tom, I just can't believe this. First, Sarah tells me Margot is making a fuss over our visits, and now this? Mrs. Walters sounded wounded, and boy did Tom jump on that note. Sarah said that? Tom turned to me, eyebrows raised as if I was the one creating trouble. Yeah, she did. And I think she's right. Family is family, Tom. You can't just turn your back on us. She pressed harder, knowing she was reeling him in. I saw my husband, a man I loved, deflate like a party balloon 2 days after the fun. The call ended with promises of another family meeting that felt more like a summit to discuss the terms of my surrender. After the call, it was as if nothing happened. Tom settled back on the couch, resuming his championship in channel surfing. Mrs. Walters resumed her drive-bys, each one a masterclass in thinly veiled jabs. And Sarah? Well, she might as well have been a puppet master the way she got Tom's ear whenever she pleased. When word got back to me that my husband's sister, Sarah, was running her mouth about me all over town, my blood boiled for a second. But I didn't let it get the best of me. I knew I had to handle this the right way. So, I waited for the right moment to deal with Sarah directly, and that moment came sooner than I thought. I found Sarah at the market on a Saturday morning, filling her basket with groceries. She didn't see me at first, but I walked right up to her, steady and strong. Sarah, I said. She looked up and rolled her eyes. What do you want, Margot? We need to talk. It's about the stories you've been spreading. She snorted loudly, a smirk spreading across her face. Stories? I don't know what you're talking about. The rumors, Sarah. About me. Emily's bossy, Emily's this and that. Cut it out. She laughed, tossing an apple up and down in her hand. And what are you going to do if I don't? You think you can boss me around? I kept my cool. Listen, spreading lies isn't just mean, it's slander. And I won't stand for it. Sarah laughed again, louder this time. You're gonna sue me? Get real, Margot. You ain't got the stomach for that. People's reputations are at stake. I'm serious, Sarah. Keep it up, and yes, I will take legal action if I need to. The arrogance just poured off her as she leaned in close. You're in way over your head. Little Miss City Lawyer gonna take me to court? This isn't a joke, Sarah. I'm giving you a chance to stop this nonsense before it gets serious. She shoved her face closer to mine, a challenge plain in her expression. Bring it on, Margot. Do your worst. With that, she spun on her heel, almost knocking over a display of canned beans, and left me standing there. Her laughter echoed through the aisle long after she was gone. I walked back home slower than usual, turning everything over in my mind. Later that day, when my husband came back from wherever he'd been, I told him what had happened. He was in the middle of taking his boots off and he froze, one boot off, the other still on. You did what now? I told Sarah off. I threatened her with legal action if she doesn't stop spreading rumors. His face went red, then white. You couldn't just let it go? Why'd you have to stir the pot, Margot? I straightened up. Because it's not right, and I won't be walked over. Not by her, not by anyone. We were silent for a good long while after that, both of us lost in our thoughts. It was clear this was more than a little family squabble, it was a line drawn in the sand, and I had to stand my ground. He's got nothing. Just stands there with that same lost puppy look that's growing a permanent spot on his face. I tossed myself onto the couch, fuming. The gossip might calm down for now, but Sarah, she's the kind of weed that keeps sprouting up. No tellin' when she'll start her yappin' again. And Tom? God knows if he'll ever find the guts to stand up to them. Right now, though, I just need to cool off, figure out my next move in this messy game they're all too eager to play. The whole mess with Sarah had me weighing my options like a pros and cons list in my head. I mean, I signed up for a life with Tom, not a daily soap opera with his family. And with things going from bad to worse, the D word started rattling around in my brain like loose change in a dryer. Then, as if on cue, Mrs. Walters, the town's self-appointed gossip queen and Sarah's godmother, rings me up. Margot, dear, she chirped like a bird that spotted a worm. We're throwing a little shindig for Sarah's engagement. It's happening at Luigi's next week. We'd love to see you there. The tone of her voice was all fake nicety, the kind that practically screams I dare you to show up. I'm staring at the silent phone after hanging up, thinking how this invite smells like a setup. Tom's already on edge, and now this? I couldn't help but blurt out to him, guess who's got plans for us next week? He's sitting at the kitchen table, forehead creased like he's trying to iron it out with thought. Who's scheming now? Your sister's engagement party, I say flat out. We're invited, courtesy of Mrs. Walters. His face goes a shade paler, the crease deepening. Oh, hell. Yeah. Oh, hell sounds about right. So, what's the play here, Tom? We gotta roll over and play nice, or what? He's quiet for too long, and I'm not having it. Come on, spit it out. Tom finally looks up, his eyes are all serious. Margot, it's family. I think we should go. I cross my arms, feeling the heat rise up my neck. And let Sarah have a field day? I'm not their punching bag. He throws his hands up, a little too dramatic if you ask me. What do you want me to say? That's my sister, Margot. I lean in, my own hands flat on the table. And I'm your wife. Or does that not count for much these days? The D word is right there on the tip of my tongue, but I bite it back hard. Tom runs his hand through his hair, making it stand up like he's just had an electric shock. Of course, it counts. Look, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place here. I'm a heartbeat away from losing my cool. Well, guess what, sweetheart? So am I. I married you, not your constant need to please your family at my expense. Tom stands up, walks over, and takes my hands. They felt like rough grip paper, all work and worry. Margot, I love you. I do. And I hate that it's got to this. Let's not go to the party. You and me, we're a team, right? It struck me then that this was the first time in a long while he'd picked me over them without flinching. It felt like finding an oasis in the middle of the desert. That night, the thought of divorce quietly tucked itself away, not gone, but sleeping, sort of like a dog with one eye always open. But it was enough for me to catch my breath, to maybe believe that we could find some solid ground again. Luigi's was hoppin' when we showed up, walls throbbing with too loud laughter and clinking glasses. I spot Mrs. Walters right off, sitting queen bee style at the biggest table with that I rule the world look. There's Tom's sister, Sarah, all grins like she's won the lottery, and her guy, Mark, a sort of deer-in-headlights type trying to smile. His folks are with them too, stiff and awkward like they wandered into the wrong movie theater. Mrs. Walters zeroes in on me the second we step in. "Margot," she uses, like I'm a 5-year-old who's not playing nice. "You'll be taking care of the bill tonight, right? To show you're one of us." I just about spit out my drink. What? Why me? The table's all ears now, and the air's thick with that "oh, this is gonna be good" vibe. Mrs. Walters stretches her smile. Tradition, sweetheart. The newest family member always shows their commitment. My jaw clamps shut so fast I'm surprised I don't chip a tooth. Commitment? That sounds a whole lot like a shakedown. Everyone's perked up like hounds hearing a whistle, and there she goes, Mrs. Walters puffing up like I've slapped her. "Excuse me? That's uncalled for." Tom leans in, his voice barely more than a spit of sound. "Just do it, Margot. It's not a big deal." "A big deal?" I fire back, whisper turned to a snarl. "No thanks. I ain't no one's piggy bank." He's hissing now, real quiet but clear. "Pay the damn bill, Margot, or we're through." I mean it. My laugh's as sharp as a snapped wire. "You're not serious?" He's all stone face and tight mouth. "You think I'm playing?" I stare him down. "Divorce over this?" He's all, "Family first, Margot." I'm shaking my head, and where do I fit, huh? It's showdown time, and even Mark and his parents are watching, their faces screaming what the hell's going on? I push back my chair and stand, let them all get an earful. "No, I ain't doing this dance," I say, voice like a hammer on steel. There's shock on their faces, some whispering, some wide-eyed. Tom's going red, white, red, like a stoplight losing its mind. Mrs. Walters looks like she might choke. I walk out into the night. It's black and cool and smells like freedom. I hear the door slam behind me, my heart's doing a 100-yard dash, but it's Tom who flung the D word, not me. The bar was nothing special, just another hole in the wall with dim lights and the smell of old beer. I had barely settled with a glass of something strong when my phone rang. It was Tom, and for a moment, I considered not answering. But I did. "Margot, listen, I'm sorry. I didn't want to say divorce." Tom's voice was rushed, apologetic. Before I could even think of a response, Sarah's voice blasted through. "You've ruined my engagement dinner, you selfish." The phone must have changed hands so fast my head spun. I could practically hear the venom in her voice. In the background, I heard Mrs. Walters, loud and clear. "Why should I pay? He's your son, you pay the bill." I won't have my daughter married into a family that doesn't know how to treat. The chaos from Luigi's was spilling through the phone like a bad sitcom without a laugh track. People were arguing, and it seemed like nobody was keen on picking up the tab. I pushed away from the bar, my anger lending me a clear, calm voice. "Sarah, chill out. Your mom's the one making a scene, not me." "Hang up, Margot," Tom said, now a faint whisper behind his sister's ranting. "No, she needs to." Sarah kept going, but I wasn't about to play this game. I ended the call. The screen showed a string of missed calls and texts that I swiped away. They were probably all about the same thing. Guilt, blame, the usual. I looked at the bartender. "Another one, please." He nodded, pouring another shot without a word. Silence settled around me, except for the low murmur from the regulars scattered around. I tried to collect my thoughts. My phone screen lit up again, showing Tom's name. The guy just didn't know when to quit. I flipped the phone face down, letting it go to voicemail. It was futile to talk when the whole crew was going off the rails back there. A few drinks later, the door to the bar creaked open, and in came a chilly gust of evening air. But I didn't look up. It didn't matter who was coming and going. I thought about what just happened, what it all meant. Here I was, sitting in a bar because my family-in-law decided I was the bank. And instead of understanding, my supposed partner turned it into an ultimatum. I finally picked up my phone and typed out a text. Tom, we're done. Sarah can think what she wants, and your mom can deal with her own damn bills. I won't be part of this circus anymore. Just as I hit send, the phone rang again. This time, I shut it off. I was tired. Tired of the arguing, the demands, and above all, tired of feeling like I was alone in a partnership that was supposed to have my back. When the room finally stopped spinning, and my head felt a little clearer, I knew what had to happen next. It was time to start looking forward, even if I had to do it on my own. No more games, no more being the scapegoat for a family that couldn't see past their own drama. I walked out of the bar, leaving the noise and the night behind. The air was getting colder, and the city lights were starting to blur into the coming darkness. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was mine to take. What a mess that last evening was. The whole thing at the restaurant blew up bigger than anyone thought. The groom had had it up to here with the drama and ditched the engagement right then and there. Sarah's face when he dropped that bomb, I can't even. No one saw it coming, least of all her. Then the mother-in-law went off the deep end. She was screaming like some banshee, causing such a scene that the groom's folks were ready to dial 911. Disrespect, she was yowling. No consideration. It was chaos, the kind of thing you see on those trashy daytime shows where chairs start flying. Meanwhile, I was done. I filed for divorce and cut phone ties. Tom and his calls? Ignored. His messages? Deleted. The last I heard, him, his sister, my former mother-in-law from hell, they're all holed up in the same house, probably driving each other up the wall. As for me, it felt like I'd finally stopped holding my breath after years underwater. Life's simpler now, but that evening's still the talk whenever I bump into people from the old circle. It gets old, you know? So here's the update, for anyone who still cares, I'm living my best, most peaceful life. I'm sitting in my usual spot at the cafe down the street from my place, the one where the coffee is strong and no one asks too many questions. The barista gives me a nod. The usual? He asks, like he's asking if the sky's up. Yep, I say. That's what my days are like now, no fluff or meddling in-laws. Work's a breeze when it's just that, work. Free time is mine to enjoy without a side of guilt trips or obligations. I curl up on my couch, that one piece of furniture that's followed me through all the moves. The springs are shot to hell, but it fits my back just right. I flip on the TV, watching some crime show where they catch the bad guys by minute 40. The peace is what gets me. Not eerie or lonely, just peace. Breathe in, breathe out. No more walking on eggshells or cleaning up family feuds. This is living. When I hit the pillow each night, it's with a sense of I did it. No pat on the back needed. I know my worth, and finally, I'm living like it. I'm eating my lunch when the phone dings. A message from a number I don't know. Probably Tom, using someone else's phone to reach out. I delete it without reading. Not today, Satan, not ever, actually. They used to say, you'll regret this. But here I am, not a single regret in sight. The day drags out, cozy and fine, and it ends with a glass of something smooth and a book I've been meaning to read. The heroine's tough, but fair, reminds me of someone I know.